Interceptors modify requests and responses before and after the route handler. They have access to request and response objects. Like middleware, it intercepts the request before it reaches the route handler, but it also intercepts and modifies responses on the way back. For example, the route handler might return the number 1, the interceptor might do some logic like add 1, and the client actually gets the number 2. This was just a simple example. Let's now code an interceptor. Let's start by creating a folder for the interceptors, and the first interceptor we are going to create is one that tells us the duration of a request. Interceptors are classes, once again, which we can export it, and I'm going to name it rec duration interceptor, and these classes implement the Nest interceptor interface. Let me just add here the injectable decorator so I don't forget it. And now let's check this interface by control or command clicking on it. It has a context, it has a next, which calls a handler, and it returns an observable. Let's copy this and paste it inside here. I need to import this and the observable, which comes from RxJS. I can remove the types since it doesn't really matter for the tutorial, and I can even put it as any. And now let's start. Like the middleware's episode, you will write some logic here, and then you will call the next function to proceed with the request. But here, interceptors have access to the route handler, and because of that, we need to return next.handle. But if you hover the word handle, you can see it returns an observable. If you don't know what an observable is, think of it of a group of values in a sequence that you get over time. It's kind of like a promise, but instead of returning one single value, it returns multiple values in what we call a stream. And to do something before the handler, we add it here, so I can console log the word before. We use the pipe method. And to console log in pipes, we need to use tab from RxJS, and inside here, inside the arrow function, you can actually log the word after. And let's not forget to return this, save it, and now let's test this. How do we use interceptors? It's the same thing as every other thing. You go to the controller, and before the controllers, you use the use, but this time interceptors. And I can come here to copy the name, paste it, and import it. Let's now test this. In the HTTP request, I'm going to do a get all dogs, and it didn't work. Let me check the error. I didn't save. That's my error. It's not an error. Okay. Let me do a request. Okay, it works. I have a before right here, and I have a after. And in the middle, I got logged authenticating from a previous lesson, and I also got the response right here. And now that you know how to do something before and after the route handler is called, let's continue with the logic. Instead of logging before, I'm going to get now from performance.now. All you need to know is that we will get the time before the handler is called, and then we will get the time after the handler is called. So here, instead of console logging, let's open this and get the duration, which is still performance.now, but this is after the handler is called, minus the performance.now before, and this gets us the total duration. We can now log the duration, and let's test this. Let's now do the request of the dogs, and as you can see, we got 2.4. This is in milliseconds, that's how performance.now works. So 2.4 milliseconds to do this. If I do it again, it is quicker. It is 0.6, so not even a millisecond. Of course that this is super fast because we are not actually using an external database, but you get the point. It's pretty straightforward. And now let's create an interceptor that changes what we receive, which is the main purpose of interceptors. To be quicker, let's copy and paste the interceptor we already did and just rename it. I'm going to name it format response interceptor, and inside it we can remove the logic we have already done and also the import, and finally change the name to format response interceptor. Okay, how can we format the response? Let's say instead of all of these objects being here, I want them to be inside an array named data. For that, you can import map from RxJS. We take all the data that we get from the handler and we can put that data inside a data object. Hit save, and this time, instead of using an interceptor in the controller like we have done here, since this formats the responses, it's better to use it globally. So I'm going to my main and app.use global interceptors. Let's take the format response interceptor and import it. And now let's check this out. I hit save and let's see. Instead of the objects, if I now do get dogs, I get them inside a data array. This means if I call this API in the front end, for example, I need to say .data to actually get the data. And I can also add more things besides just the data. I could say, instead of the data right here, more info. And this could be an object with random things. Random 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to hit save and do the get dogs route again. And you can see I have the data array, but I also have more info. You could even take the duration interceptor right here. And in the more info, you could say duration and paste it here. And you will also get the duration in the response. But in all the responses, because we use this interceptor globally. Another really good use case is for caching. On the way back, the response is intercepted, and the interceptor checks if it is already in cache. If it is, then it will use the cache. But if it isn't, it just sends the response normally, and it will add it to the cache for later use. Cache is out of the scope of this video, but it is nice to know that you can do this. Let's now finish this episode strong with an error handling interceptor. I'm going to copy and paste the one we already had. Once again, change it to timeout interceptor, delete a bit of the logic so we have a clean template, the import, change the name to timeout, and let's use it. Here inside pipe, I'm going to use a lot of things from RxJS, so just keep in mind I'm importing stuff while doing it. I'm going to use the timeout, and on 5 seconds, we will get the error, okay? This is written in milliseconds, by the way. Then let's catch the error, take that error and use it in some way. The way I want to use it is if the error is an instance of timeout error, then let's throw the error, throw error. And how do we throw errors? You already know some exceptions from another episode, so try to guess which one I'm going to use here. I'm going to use the request timeout exception. And for all the other errors besides the timeout error, I'm just going to throw the error. Let's now save this, use it globally, copy, go to main, and right next to the one we already have, you can separate it by a comma and use it. Let's import it. And how do we test this now? To test a timeout interceptor, we need to force the response to take more than 5 seconds because right now I'm getting all the dogs and it is properly working. And in order to do that, we need to go to the controller, and here in the find all, for example, let's make a promise resolve in more than 5 seconds by awaiting a new promise, taking the resolve and putting it in a timeout, in a set timeout right here. And let's resolve it in 6 seconds. Now this is a wait, so I can put an async and it will return a promise now. I'm going to get all the dogs and it's taking some time. 2, 1, 0, and then we just got an error. A status code of 408 because it took more than the 5 seconds, it took 6. Here is the name, request timeout. We get the message properly formatted from another episode, and we can also go here to the filters we have created in another episode. You can take the filter and let's add a new case. I'm going to copy this and say if it is a request timeout, which here it says request timeout, let's print that. And now if I do this request again, instead of getting general error, I will get request timeout. Interceptors are done. We are getting close to the end of this beginner series, so stick with me to the next episode.